Right.
Last night, Graham Chapman, writer and performer with Monty Python's Flying Circus, lost his battle with cancer. By a sad irony, it was 20 years ago tonight that the first episode of Monty Python was shown on this very channel. Viewers will remember Chapman's gallery of subversive authority figures, a feature in many of Python's greatest sketches. With me to remember both a friend and a collaborator is writer Douglas Adams, creator of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas, tell us a bit about what Graham Chapman was like.
Well, he was extremely, well, in fact, he was the most extremely person I think I've ever met. It didn't really matter what the adjective was, because he would be extremely that. And whether it was kind or unkind or good or bad or funny or not funny, I mean, there was nothing he ever did that he didn't do it much more extremely than anybody else would.
Did this include writing? Was this part of his view of comedy?
Absolutely. I think you used an interesting phrase when you were introducing him. You said subversive authority figures, which sounds rather like a paradox, and actually it's a very good paradox as far as Graham is concerned. He was, but actually the person he continually subverted was himself. He liked, because I mean he was always this rather sort of tweedy person on first meeting. I mean that was an impression which sort of lasted at least 3 seconds into any relationship. You know, he sort of stand there sort of pipe smoking and sort of rather as if he'd sort of come out of a sort of university rugby club, which I think he probably did belong to, in fact. But there was always a sort of danger there because you never actually knew what was going to happen next. I mean, there was one occasion I remember. Now, I didn't actually witness this myself. He told me about it, so I can't absolutely guarantee it to be true. He was standing in a pub, which is something he used to do an awful lot, even after he gave up drinking. He virtually lived in the local pub. And he got rather irritated at being served rather slowly at the bar, and he was sort of standing there with a sort of pipe, and after a while I suddenly realised that he was actually sort of slapping his penis rather impatiently against the bar to attract the barman's attention. So there's this sort of constant setting himself up as one thing in order to surprise you again and again and again. Was
this part of the way he worked? Was it part of his role in the whole Monty Python phenomenon?
Well, I think it's funny because in one way he was very much a sort of team person, because he needed to have a team to disrupt. He tended to be, I think, the sort of quiet one a little bit at Python meetings. I mean, I was never there, but I can only tell you what I've heard. And everyone else would be sort of busying away at this idea or that idea, and then maybe we would get stuck. And Graham would suddenly be the one who would suddenly emerge from behind his pipe and say something absolutely ludicrous, which would turn everything entirely on its head. So he needed, he needed to have, if you like, sort of authority there to be angry against, sort of disrupt.
Where do you think that came from in his life when you got to know him a bit? Was there a place in his life that came from?
I think he was somebody who actually probably came from a very, very sort of quiet, domestic background, who suddenly began to find when he was at university and later that there were all sorts of other forces inside him that had never found full play. Obviously, I mean, one of the main ones of those was when he suddenly discovered and then later astounded the world by announcing that he was gay. And because he had up to that point, as I say, appeared to be a very straight and conventional person, he suddenly gave a party one day and just announced to the world that he was gay.
But that simplicity is part of his whole thing, the fact that he could undermine an authority figure with extreme simplicity and still get the laughs.
Give you an example of the way he used to work with John Cleese, which was, I mean, that was the classic team, because John is very, very meticulous, very disciplined, very logical, and Graham, again, would work to disrupt the way that John worked.
He worked against
Yes,
that.
exactly.
Yes.
So John would have be working away on the sketch about somebody returning a defunct toaster. And Graham would say, you know, I think it should be a parrot, and it should be a dead parrot.
So
and suddenly
a
very beautifully worked out workmanlike sketch would suddenly be taken into a sort of magic level.
But it doesn't sound a very easy way to proceed in his own work. It didn't sound. Did he have the sort of discipline that allowed him to make his own ideas functional as a solo performer?
I'm not sure. I think he needed. I mean, he certainly had the sort of quietest career since the Pythons broke up, and I think suddenly not having things to react against, I think, was a bit of a problem for him. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. But I think, again, I mean, the contribution. If you look at the sketches, for instance, of Mike and Terry within
Yes.
Python, which are always very, very sort of wild sketches, but you always had a sense of actually knowing where you were within them and what the rules of this particular
Yes.
universe were and how they applied. It's only when it's Graham's influence which would tend to make you feel the whole time you actually had no idea what you were next in for, because it could be very dangerous.
A suitable epitaph for a great comic gift. Thank you, Douglas Adams.